What's up, noobs? On today's episode of How'd They Do It, I've got Elisa Covington. She formerly worked in big tech before transitioning to house flipping, where she's been absolutely crushing it. And she's also crushing it on YouTube. She started her channel Transform Real Estate a couple months before I started mine and now has over 30,000 subs. So definitely check out her channel. She shares every detail about her projects there and is an awesome resource for real estate noobs. But for today, she's going to tell us a little bit about how all of it started with her very first deal. So Elisa, welcome to the show and tell us, how did you find your first deal? And then tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Derek, for the introduction, and thanks for having me. My first deal was back in 2017. At that time, I was still working on my full-time job, and I decided to start flipping houses on the side. So I was able to find my first deal by cold calling real estate agents. I set aside a few hours a day to just cold call agents to start building my network. And after about a month of calling, I was able to find my first deal. It was a Victorian style home in downtown San Jose in a pocket neighborhood called Negley Park. And there are many old homes in that neighborhood, and there's a very good demand for that type of home because a lot of buyers are really intrigued by older homes and the architecture.
All right, so out of all those first deals you got from the brokers, what about this one really stood out to you and it made you pull the trigger and say, yeah, this is going to be my first one?
It's all about the numbers. So when the numbers work, the deal just makes sense. So this was the first one that I got from real estate agents that actually the numbers worked. So the purchase price was $1 million, and the comps in the area were very good. So I was seeing comps in the 1.3, 1.4 million range. So there is a big margin between the purchase price and the after repair value that makes the deal make sense.
So you mentioned the purchase price was $1 million. How'd you finance it?
I borrowed a hard money loan for, I believe it was either 85 or 90% of the purchase price. And I used my own funds to cover the rest of the purchase price and the rehab cost.
And how much were those rehab costs?
I put in about $120,000, which exceeded the budget that I had, which was $100,000. But because I had a bad contractor, the budget went up and the construction time went much longer than I planned. So it took about 6.5 months for the whole project to be turned around. And in the end, I was able to sell the home for $1.35 million. And the return on the project was about 7%. It was lower than anticipated, but for the first deal and after working with a bad contractor, I think it was a pretty good experience.
I'm guessing that bad contractor was part of your biggest lesson learned on this deal?
Yeah, I learned that I have to be very careful when selecting contractors because they can really make or break your deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your core team has to execute so well because there's just so many other house flippers out there. Even if your deal does have a little wiggle room, if you want to make this a long-term, full-time thing, you got to make sure that your team is working well with you and executing.
Mm-hmm,
so,
of course.
At this point, how many house flips have you done?
I've done about 30.
Wow. And out of those 30, what do you think is your single best deal?
I don't really have a single best deal, but my best deals turn to be the ones where I make the most profit. And that's usually the deals where I was able to make about $300,000 in profit. And I've done that a few times now. A most recent deal was a Spanish home where I purchased it for $1.15 million, put in about $140,000, and I sold it for $1.675 million.
Wow. Any lessons learned from that one?
I wouldn't say lesson, but probably a good takeaway from that deal is you really want to preserve the style of the home if it's a really unique style. Like that home is of Spanish style, and Spanish style is pretty unique. some buyers really like the old world charm it had. So that's why like the few buyers really fell in love with the home, and they loved the upgrades I did, and they were willing to bid up the price on that home by a lot. So if you put thoughts into the design and into the finishing and the layout of the home, then you can really make your buyers fall in love, and then it will help your profit.
And I think that's a really important point you need to make for the noobs out there, because it's really not just about the money and the profits. And Elisa puts a lot of emphasis on her design quality and preserving original details in all her videos. So definitely check out her channel, because she takes a design first mentality, and the profits naturally follow as a result of that. And finally, Elisa, I want to ask you, what is the single biggest piece of advice that you would give for real estate noobs out there?
I think it's really important to be selective of your first deal, because you don't want to just jump into this business. It's actually better to not do any deals than to do a bad deal.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because you don't want to waste a lot of time and energy and then at the end of the day lose money, because it's so mentally draining, and you'll just keep thinking about how you could have just taken a vacation the whole time and ended up in a better spot than if you had just worked on something and lost money.
Exactly.
All right, Elisa, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Hopefully we'll see you again sometime, but noobs, definitely go over there, hit subscribe, check out her stuff. It's really good content. So stay curious, noobs, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.